Welcome to Spiritual as Fuck.
Spiritual as Fuck.
A podcast where we explore everything outside of the ordinary. I'm Liz Volpe. I'm a social entrepreneur, now psychic medium, teacher and mentor, with a huge passion to inspire people to dream big and change the world.
I'm Diane Driscoll, a coach, facilitator and speaker. I'm also a psychic intuitive, learning to incorporate my spiritual gifts into my life and business.
We're here today to share real and raw spiritual stories. It's going to give you a safe space to challenge what's normal and have some serious fun along the way.
We hope you're ready to get spiritual as fuck. Our first guest of 2024 is the incredible Rebecka Maklad. Rebecka is the master of soul-led healing practices, embarking on a transformative journey that commenced in London at the tender age of 19, where she immersed herself in the study of energetic healing at the renowned College of Psychic Studies. Returning to Sydney, she emerged as a pioneering Chakradance instructor and has since become a qualified Shamanic Breathwork and meditation teacher. She has devoted herself to uncovering the purpose and untapped potential of notable entrepreneurs, authors, and thought leaders. And through her business and podcast, The Future is Om, she is committed to unlocking ancient wisdom for the modern world. In this interview, Rebecka shares with us a crazy tale of psychic attachment. If your spiritual as fuck journey has caused you at times to feel like you are going crazy, then I am certain that this story will resonate for you and also give you much needed light at the end of the tunnel. Liz and I are both in awe of Beck, as she is courageously sharing this deeply personal story for the first time in a public forum. This story touches on childhood trauma, mental ill health, shadow work, entities and psychic attachments, as well as many, many pearls of wisdom on chakra systems, energy clearing, psychic protection, and the power of Chakradance. So prepare to sit at the edge of your seat, waiting with bated breath to hear how this story unfolds and how it has propelled the many facets of Rebecka's work.
Welcome back, everybody. My goodness, it's January. We're already well into the year. And today, our guest, my good friend Beck, has a really incredible story to share, actually. Beck is super inspiring, always inspires me, and she's intelligent. And, on my spiritual journey, she's just been one of those people that has really stood beside me. So there's been times where, yes, I thought I was going crazy. And I know that Beck is the person I can pick up the phone to, and she doesn't go, "Oh, you're crazy." She doesn't laugh in my face, because she's potentially got an even more crazy story than me. So we kind of fit together. Good friends, Beck. Okay? So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the Spiritual as Fuck podcast. God, I love saying that title.
Don't you love the name?
So do
right?
we. I love that. It is such a joy to be joining you guys. What an honor.
Oh, well, thank you. And honestly, thank you for coming on board and be willing to, I guess, share your story today, because I know that it is one of the first times you've ever shared all of your story, and it is an intense story. So we're going to dive right in with this, Beck, and we'll go back, I guess, to you as a teenager, because this is really where your spiritual story started, isn't it? Tell us how you went from, I guess, the teenage Beck with going through life, doing your do, to suddenly finding yourself exploring spirituality.
What a journey. My spiritual journey did come to life as a teenager, but as you were speaking, Liz, in relation to me being a person you called when you were going through your own spiritual awakening, it made me reflect on the fact that for me, spirituality has actually never been something I considered outside of normal. Even as a child, I grew up with an uncle who was very psychic. So I remember even like at the age of 6 or 7, sitting in the living room with my uncle there and with my cousin, asking him all about these spirits that he was seeing. My cousin was also extremely psychic. So, for example, we went over to Perth to go into the church where my grandparents were married. And my 6-year-old, we were both 6 and 7 at the time, comes bolting out of the church because she saw an apparition of our grandfather in the window. So as you were talking, Liz, I was thinking about why it is so normal to me. And it's because I've actually grown up in a family where it has never been any different. Spirituality was spoken about and spirits were spoken about, just like other family members that would kind of just be like, hey, such and such has dropped in and is in the corner as we're all sat there having Christmas
Give your Uncle
dinner.
Fred a wave. He stood next to the TV.
It was literally like that. And like when my grandma passed away, my uncle kind of saying, I've been helping her transition. And this was like all really normal banter for us in our family. So whilst it did definitely catalyze through a very specific experience once I was older, that thread of spirituality was like extremely normal in our household.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Then it must have been something pretty big. I'm thinking if you're starting with that baseline of this is all just normal in our family, we talk about, spirit, we talk about transitioning, we talk about those things, then it must have been something pretty profound that, I guess shifted you or jolted you into that next level of spirituality.
It absolutely was. And before I dive into this story, I just want to create a little bit of sacred space around the story by firstly saying that some of the themes that I'm about to dive into are connected to childhood trauma. So I just want to let your listeners know that I may touch on themes related to that trauma and for them to have a choice as to where and when they're listening to this podcast, just in case something that I share taps into, something that somebody is processing or needing to heal in their own lives. So I just want to sort of give people a little bit of warning there.
Yeah, thank you.
My story began around the age of, between 16 to 18. At 16, my grandma passed away, who I absolutely adored. And then not that long after, my brother died in quite tragic circumstances. Wow. Now, as I've already referenced, I already had some context of spirituality. But when death actually happens, it really invites you into a process where you confront like the physical reality of death. It's very easy to kind of be like, oh, there's all these spirits here. But when you physically lose somebody, it's, you've got to process that at a whole different level.
Especially being that age as well. I mean, that's a really tough age to lose someone.
Yeah,
exactly. And I just remember at that time tuning into the energy of my grandma and my brother and having this really distinct thought that there is no way that someone that big, that expansive could be a bag of bones under the earth. It just, nothing about that made sense to me. And that was when I started to become really spiritually curious. So at that point, I remember running up to the local spiritual store and literally buying every single book on spirituality. And it was around that time, probably, maybe six months later, that my cousin came back into my life. Now, my cousin today is the founder of Chakradance, which is a healing movement modality, which is really growing all over the world. It's been incredible to watch her journey. And at that point in time, she just moved back to Sydney after spending 12 years in London, during which time she had studied at the College of Psychic Studies in London. She had studied in Jungian psychology and literally birthed Chakradance from her living room, where she was able to find this incredible connection between spiritual music that is chakra resonant, and free spontaneous dance. And so she'd started running these Chakradance classes in London, but had decided to come back to Sydney with her husband, Paul. Now, Natalie and I hadn't really connected since I was a small child. And at that point in time, she was like my big, awesome cousin, like we weren't at an age where we could have that kind of adult relationship. But when she came back the second time, I was maybe 19. She would have been, maybe early 30s at that point. And it was just like an explosion, like soul sisters coming together.
Beautiful.
But aside from that family kind of sister bond that we had as first cousins, the only girls in the family, she also had this gift for me, a gift that, that was presented in the form of the chakra system. So Natalie started to teach me about the chakras. And given the context of the loss I had experienced, including the loss of both of our cousins, Greg, my brother, her cousin, Greg, I had so many questions at that point, and I was carrying a lot of trauma, some that I was conscious of in going through a grieving process, but other aspects of that, which I'll touch on soon, was related to trauma that I'd experienced as a child, but I wasn't consciously aware of that at that point in time. So the chakras all of a sudden became like this map where I'm like, are you telling me that there is a map through which I can not only better understand myself, I can actually heal myself? I don't have to carry all of this pain around. And so the chakras became like this portal of hope for me.
That first bit of magic that you're like, wow, there's more to life.
That first bit of magic. And, during that time, I have one memory that's just seared in my mind of standing in my cousin's living room, and Natalie had taken me through an energy healing exercise where we'd literally connected the palms of our hands, and she'd started channeling healing energy through. And it was the first time that I'd really had like that visceral experience of energy. Like I could feel my hands heating up. I could feel the tingles moving around my body. And that moment with Nat will always stay with me, because it was at that point where I was like, wow, there's something going on here. Like, what is this? Now, at that point, the chakras moved from being a theory, an idea, a map, to like, I can touch and feel this stuff. Like, what is going on? And from that moment forward, energy work became as real to me as the physical world. Like it was tangible. It was tactile.
Yes. Yeah.
And I knew at that point that some part of my work was going to be in spiritual healing. Truth be known, I'm still working out what that looks like.
Join the club.
The never-ending joy of a spiritual journey.
Absolutely.
I was so committed to that at that point in time that I made a decision that I wanted to go to London, and that I also wanted to study at the College of Psychic Studies. So much to my father's dismay, I left a very normal job working in a radio station after completing my studies in media. And I remember, sitting down, having a chat with my dad and being, right, Dad, I'm leaving it all. I'm going to the College of Psychic Studies. And him looking at me like I was literally going to Harry Potter school. Like, what are you actually talking about? Nonetheless, they were incredibly supportive of that decision. And my best friend at the time also had decided to go to London to do a gap year. So off we went. And by this point, like we were 21, like we thought we were so, mature and wise. But literally we were like these tiny little girls with these massive backpacks getting on the plane to go off to London. And at that point, when I reflect on that time, I was very much in this space of kind of love, light, harmony, rainbow, unicorn spirituality. And the truth is, I needed to be, because that had become this kind of beacon of hope for me in relation to getting through such a dark, tough period.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't conscious of the fact that I was doing that, but I absolutely was doing that. And in some ways, there was a little bit of an ignorance to that. I'm just thinking about, in the Matrix, the red pill and the blue pill example. I can't actually remember which one is which, but it was like I was quite happy to take the kind of illusional form of spirituality that's all love, light, and harmony. And this is all my
everything's going to be fine.
Rather than kind of realizing the depth of the work.
I think later we kind of look at that and realize that there's are we spiritual bypassing? It's something that I question myself. And I think, am I going into the love and light stuff a little bit too much? Because there is, there's a balance in all things.
Yeah, look, there's absolutely a balance. And don't get me wrong, the love and light side of things serves a purpose, and when you're able to tap into that kind of joy, that expansion, it's a beautiful thing. But, for any great light, there is an equally great shadow. And I was about to learn about that in a very, very big way. And so I went over to London, and all of a sudden these two dual lives started to emerge, because on one hand, I'm at the College of Psychic Studies and I'm learning about the chakras and energy healing. And, looking back again, it was hilarious. I was this young kid in this College of Psychic Studies that had literally been there for something like 250 years. Like, I can't tell you the energy of this building.
Wow, I can only imagine how crazy that building felt.
And all of that sort of thing. But on the flip side, like many young Aussie backpackers, I'd found myself living in a pub. And the energy of that pub was not nearly as incomparable to the energy.
I mean, they're always haunted, those pubs in London as well, let's be honest.
It was completely haunted.
Yes.
And so on one hand, I'm doing all of this psychic work and working with my chakras and opening up my energy field in a way where I wasn't really protected. I hadn't worked out how to protect myself.
Controlled
I didn't have it. Like, in a way, I was so young. Like, I kind of wish that I'd went in my early 30s, because I would have approached that whole course through a completely different lens and with different tools. So essentially the work I'm doing at the Psychic College is kind of opening me up, yet I'm then living in a pub where the lifestyle was, there was a lot of partying, a lot of entities in that pub, a lot of like darkness stirring at that particular time. I remember at one point going to my teacher, who was a lady called Sue, and Sue specialized in spirit release. So her day job was to clear entities, earthbound spirits, all that sort of thing, from people's homes, from attachments to people, all of that sort of stuff. Like, that was literally her job. She was the most amazing teacher, like incredible person to work with. Again, I wish I'd been a bit older. I would have appreciated it a little bit more than I did. But I remember going and doing a session with Sue during this period of time. And she quite literally not only released entities that had got stuck to my energy field, but I remember her tuning into the pub through me and doing a complete spirit release. She released something like 6 or 7 entities from this particular pub. Yeah. That I was living in. And so, like, I think it's important to say at this point that whilst you might be listening and feel completely freaked out by what I'm sharing, the reason this happened to me was, again, I'm going to come back to the psychic protection piece. I was completely unaware of how to actually protect my energy field. So I'm literally doing this deep spiritual work that is stirring up all of my energy, shifting through all of my blocks, but it was also like bursting my energy field wide open. All of a sudden, I'm sending all of this energy up into my higher chakras. And then to add to that, I'm in a pub living like quite a lifestyle that isn't conducive to energetic hygiene and energetic health. So essentially...
Okay, Beck, what do you mean by that? We need...
Can
you get, and it is just to get into the real and raw elements of this. It's like, because on one hand, you're immersing yourself in your studies, you're bursting yourself wide open. And then, I'm getting the sense that, there's a conflict or a very different kind of balance of what's going on the other side.
Yeah. So like, I didn't know this at the time. And when we get to the end of the story, the context will make sense.
Yeah.
But while I'm at the Psychic College, basically I'm stirring up all of these blocks in my energy field. Now, I said it before, I had a lot going on and a lot that I had completely repressed. It wasn't in my conscious memory. I'd literally had trauma occur and packed it away into the darkest closet in the back of my psyche. And at an energetic level, the body holds on to that. Like, it's not just that we push memories away, we push energy down. Those memories, those experiences, that trauma in whatever capacity is held in a deeply unconscious part of ourselves, but it still sits in our chakras, in our bodies.
Yes.
And so I'm stirring up all of this, and I'm not aware of that. So given I didn't really have the tools to deal with that at that time, what started to happen was I started to leave my body. So people talk in relation to trauma about disassociation.
Yes.
At an energetic level, disassociation is where the soul essentially starts to lift up out of the car. And the reason the soul's lifting up out of the car is because the soul's going, holy hell, what's in the car? And if you think about trauma as being like, I don't know, let's say a bomb in the car, the soul's going, get me out of here. I really don't want to deal with this bomb.
Absolutely.
And a part of that escapism for me, added by the context of being 20 in London in a pub, was how do I escape all of this?
Yeah.
So you've got these behaviors playing out, like drinking too much, partying too much, that were a form of escapism. So I'm stirring it all up over here, yet I'm escaping from it all over here. And so you asked about energy hygiene. When we're in this kind of path of escapism and we're doing things that are fundamentally destructive to our energy, we can start to actually wear through our auric shell.
It's like a recipe for disaster, right?
It's like a recipe.
Two different energies smashing into each other.
Exactly. So I know we're going to talk about chakras maybe a little further into the conversation, but think about your energy field as a big egg that is a sphere around the physical body. When you are doing, as I was, that deep energy work and then partying a lot, essentially what can happen is you can crack holes in that egg. Yeah. So I had no psychic protection to protect the egg, and then I was taking actions to quite literally destroy the egg. And then I'm in an environment full of entities.
So how did this play out, Beck? Because I can imagine like that's sounds like a tornado, you know.
Well, it really was.
How did at 21, that's what we're all doing.
You're vulnerable, you're innocent.
All doing that. That's what we're expected to do in life. You go out and you party.
Yeah, and I think had I stayed in a state of not being conscious, not doing the spiritual work, not doing all the healing work, I may have been able to cope with that simply because I would have been closed down anyway.
Yeah.
But I was intentionally doing work to open up at exactly the same time. So, which is not a really great idea. So what ended up unfolding is, look, I came back to Australia at one point, just before I'd finished the course, and literally had 6 weeks at that point staying at my parents' farm. At the time, they had 30 acres. Nature, had grown up with horses, so had kind of come back and gone through, again, not that I was aware of it, but this kind of deep grounding process. But the truth is, by that point in time, I was actually spiritually and mentally unwell.
Okay.
But nonetheless, I had to go back to London because I still had to do my final exam, and I'd been there for 2 years, and I literally had to do one final assessment to get my certificate from the College of Psychic Studies to enable me to become a healer, essentially. And so I went back, and it was during that last 2 weeks in London where I started to really become quite unhinged. And the best way I can describe that is, again, I'll use the car analogy. If we imagine our physical body as being the car, essentially what had started to happen is I had exited the driver's seat. So I'm sitting in the back of the car. I can't tell you the exact moment in time this happened, but I know at some point on that journey, an entity jumped into that front seat of the car.
Wow. So you felt that. Did you what did that feel like, that moment, Beck? Like that sounds terrifying.
I wasn't aware of it at the time it happened. I just slowly started to become more and more unhinged. So people around me started to be quite concerned about me. Really.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. From that friend's perspective, from the people that were living with you, how did that look to them? Like, how did unhinged look?
Well, look, they were worried about me. I mean, not only was I kind of like wild, crazy party girl, but to give you context, like by the time I went back to Sydney, I remember staying at a resort in Malaysia. Now, at that point, unhinged from an outside view could potentially be borderline bit of psychosis happening. Let's be real about it.
So like saying things that didn't make sense, acting out of the ordinary, that type of stuff.
Totally.
Okay.
Bit of cray-cray going on, right? And I mean, my friends all loved me and they were definitely concerned about me. But at that point, they just kind of were like, Beck's gone off the rails. Like, what is actually going on here?
Okay.
The interesting thing about this is, you know, I mentioned before being in the back seat of the car, and there's something else in the front seat of the car, that in being in the back seat, I was still there. It was just like I'd started to float slightly above my body, which the interesting part of that is it actually opened me up to a lot of psychic stuff. So to give that context, I remember staying at this resort in Malaysia, and I went for a walk down to the beach, and I'm stood there, and all of a sudden I just get this knowing like feeling. It was like Gaia was like communicating to me, and I get this like overriding sense that there's going to be a wave. I just knew it. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, there is going to be a wave. Anyway, that night I rang my mum from the hotel in Malaysia. And by this point, my mum is extremely, extremely concerned about me. If mum's listening, sorry, mum. And I rang my mum and I'm like, Mum, there's going to be a wave. And she's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I need you home now. You have quite literally gone completely mad.
Oh.
2 days later, the tsunami in Thailand hit.
Oh, shit, Beck. I didn't even,
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Oh, my
And how did you feel when that happened?
Well, to be honest, it was, it was some validation that I was tapping into something, but I was actually unwell. So in a way, it was kind of confusing because it was really hard to begin to separate out what was potentially a bit of psychosis from what was actually psychic intuition. Like, I didn't have the ability to even separate that out at that particular point in time.
How confusing. Oh my God.
Beck, you're making me think of, because I guess personally and professionally have dealt with a lot of mental health issues. And I know that the more spiritually curious I become, I see so many parallels with psychosis and schizophrenia in particular, and you know that multiple personality disorders as well, those types of things, and thinking that for a lot of people they can be entity related. They can be that their you know, that their soul is detached from their body. So in that moment, I can only imagine the fear factor of, okay, am I going crazy, or is this actually the real, you know, the way reality actually is when we look at it through a multi-dimensional lens?
Absolutely. And that is the reason why a shaman would deal with psychosis extremely differently to a psychiatrist, because, you know, if you look at some of the ancient healing modalities, they understand that psychosis is actually a soul condition. It's not a physical condition. To affirm what we're talking about here, once I got back to Sydney, again, Mum still very worried about me.
Of course.
A friend had called and was like, come out to the city with me. Very bad idea. But nonetheless, at this point, I'm still only 22, 23 and pretty crazy. And anyway, I get in her car, and I remember being in her car, and literally it was like the consciousness of this entity came forward, and I can hear this voice going, oh, look at your body. You've got such a great body, like literally getting excited about being in my body. Like, I literally heard it.
Physical body.
Oh my God.
And I've never, ever had that experience again, but it was the creep, and it wasn't me. It wasn't myself. Like, I felt dirty. Like, it was this dirty old man pub energy, right? And it was so conscious. And that part of this story I've never forgotten, ever. Again, at the time, I'm like, what do you do with that information? You know, like, I don't think I even really fully realized what was happening to me, or what had happened to me.
By that point, I would have been jumping out the car and rolling down the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
I wasn't, you know, like, literally, it was like I was a balloon hanging out of my body.
But that's it. If you were unwell and you're like, I mean, we like the mind and the body are phenomenal at being able to protect us from things like this. It is that dissociation, that wrapping ourselves in a bubble, or, you know, maybe trivializing things to a point where just anything to keep us functioning is what's going to override in those points in time. So
exactly.
Yeah. Oh my God. My whole body is lighting up here because I really, really empathize, really feel like, not that I can even imagine what the experience was like, but
to be honest, as a mother, I now experience it through her lens so much. I'm like, how did my mum and dad deal with all of this?
Yeah.
I mean, to close off the story, like that night going out, a lot of really crazy things happened, which, like I won't go into all of those details right now, but where that night ended was essentially me at 7 a.m. in the morning on a sunroof. And it was like all of a sudden I dropped back in. And I remember being sat on this sunroof. There was a bar there. I'd bought a glass of champagne and a chocolate muffin. Go figure. I'm sat
complimentary, a muffin and a glass of champagne.
Yeah. And this is back in the day where, things were open till 7 and 8 in the morning. Yeah. And it was like I dropped back in and all of a sudden I just started bawling my eyes out, like absolutely uncontrollable crying. And in that moment, I started to have memory recall, just like flood through my system related to sexual abuse that had occurred as a child that I wasn't actually aware of. I'd completely repressed the memory. And I don't know, like in looking back at the series of events, like I'm not sure what, like it could have been the 2 years of healing work that catalyzed it. And I literally had to go through this crazy process to finally go, you know what, I'm going to face the bomb in the car.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Maybe my brain needed to have that slight psychotic episode to reshuffle things. Like who knows the purpose of what I went through over that period of time. But where it landed was that it triggered all of this memory recall.
I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like to have that come into consciousness for you. Like, I mean, there are many of us who grow up with things that are trauma that are in our consciousness that we know and we carry forward and that, but to have something of that enormity come in and flood in at a time when your health in general wasn't particularly good either, that just the enormity of that. And like I'm so sorry, and I'm sure anyone listening to this is like, I mean, we hate to hear of anything like this happening to anyone. And but looking at you today, the fact that you're able to share this story so courageously is huge. And there will be so many people who take elements from this that will have a ripple effect to their lives.
Look, absolutely. Look, it was undeniably a crazy, soul-shattering thing, actually, to go through. People talk about the soul being shattered, and a lot of shamanic work is actually about soul retrieval and calling that energy back in. And at that particular point, my soul was completely shattered in order to be able to initially escape from what I needed to deal with until it got to the point where it was, for me, it was kind of like, deal with this consciously or die. That was kind of where I was at. And
how did you deal with this, Beck? Like, what were the next things that kind of happened? How did it play out?
Over the next year, I think about 3 months after that particular point in time, it got to a stage where I was like, I need hospital. Like I was at complete rock bottom, mental breakdown, very sick. And my mum's beautiful best friend, Auntie Marg, I absolutely love her because she was just so loyal to me through all of this. When to be fair, a lot of people were like, she's gone mad. Like you're talking 20 years ago and I end up in a psych ward. It's not like these days where people are like, oh, mental health on every bus banner, like, which is freaking amazing. But that was not my reality. Like I was the crazy girl at this particular point.
And people detach from that.
People didn't know how to deal with it. It was like this scary, horrific thing. Like she's ruined her life. Look what she's doing to her parents type narrative, you know. But it did get to the point where I needed hospital. And because of mum's best friend, she knew this incredible psychiatrist. So I ended up in hospital twice. And I ended up going on to do like 12 years of work with my psychiatrist. Dr. Nick absolutely saved my life. So,
oh, bless you, Dr. Nick.
Oh God, you Dr. Nick.
And so there is definitely a place for Western medicine, even though a big part of my healing journey, and we will talk about that, I'm sure, has been through healing modalities and Eastern frameworks, the Western medicine played a really critical part in my healing journey. Absolutely. And so, yeah, that's kind of the story in a nutshell. But it opened up, I had to this day, I still am doing a lot of healing on this. Like, it's not something that you kind of all of a sudden you're healed from this type of thing. It's, I think, when you go through any kind of childhood trauma, big T, little t, that essentially influences the rhythm of your entire life. Like, it informs your soul curriculum. Like, what you're here to process and deal with is often seeded in those childhood experiences.
Absolutely. And depending on how we look at these things, so it is a case of, my old school of thought would have been, why do these things happen? Why do these things happen to me? Because I guess from my own trauma experiences in life, you spend a lot of time, well, why did this happen? Or a lot of it, your unconscious behavior and responses to things, you don't even realize until you start working through some of that. And for me, it was, therapy as well. But also then when you get a little bit more spiritual, you look at things. And if you believe in this school of thought that we choose some of these life experiences and that life, on earth here is a school, it's a very different way to look at things, because then you become a little bit more curious about it to kind of see, well, what is the soul lesson that I'm supposed to be learning here? What is my life's purpose or my work that I'm meant to do in this life or carrying through to another one? And I know for me, the jury's still out on a lot of that stuff, because it's a lifetime of healing. It's a lifetime of discovery. But I guess the parallels that I'm seeing with what you're sharing and some of my own experiences, it is that, a lot of mental health and thinking that you were crazy, thinking that you were broken, that you needed to be fixed, but then spirituality bringing, like, definitely, the Western medicine side as well, but spirituality just giving a very different perspective, a very different context, and it almost helps you shift into something more purposeful. And I know that purpose is a word, I even get goosebumps saying it in your presence, because I know purpose is something that is so hugely important to you. And I'd love to shift into thinking about all of these life lessons, everything that you were learning along that path, because I know now the work you do, the purpose is so ingrained in that. Where was a tipping point? How did you shift into, here's about me and I'm focusing on me and I'm trying to heal me and I'm, trying to be the best person I can be. But then at some point it appears that you have exploded into helping others and, being curious about others and being curious about purpose. Can you talk us a little bit through that transition in your life?
Well, I mean, look, the story I just shared really was the birthplace for my pursuit to better understand human purpose. As for your listeners, much of my professional sphere is around decoding purpose, whether it be personal purpose in business, the purpose economy, however you want to look at it. I've dedicated much of my life to that. And that was really seeded in this experience of do or die. I literally had this experience where it was like, I've got an awful lot of healing work to do here, and it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be easy. And it wasn't. There was a lot of growth, but, it hasn't been an easy journey. And when you're going through these things, you need to know that you're here for a reason. Yes. That actually, at that level, that is the only why, is that my life matters. Because when you've been to those dark places of questioning whether it does or whether you've got what it takes, you need to connect to purpose at a completely different level. And that is not about a neatly articulated statement of why. That is about, what's it going to take for me to show up today?
Yeah.
What's it going to take for me to keep my soul embodied, to stay here in service? What does that look like at a day-to-day level? And so, those earlier experiences really set the trajectory of the work that I would go on to do, not that I was aware of it. And a big part of that is purpose is living.
You look back and just join the dots, right? And I'd love to go into, I guess, the aspect of shadow work that you've done through life, because we all have to at some point look at the shadow. And I know that for me, I ran away from that shadow for quite a long time, but at the end of the day, it will always pop up. You will always be confronted at some point with having to do some of that work. Can you share, I guess, your learnings around that, and even an explanation from your perspective on what shadow work is?
I must have known this was going to come up, this one, because I actually jotted down a beautiful quote by Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychoanalyst. Some of you might be aware of Jungian psychology. It certainly informs much of the work we do with Chakradance. And a lot of what Carl Jung talks about is fully embracing the shadow self, which essentially is the deeply unconscious parts of oneself. So in relation to my story, I spoke before about my ability to completely repress memories, to put all of those things in the dark closet at the back of the room. That's a really good example of shadow aspects, the parts of ourselves that we are yet to make conscious. So Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So in this sense, you can think about shadow work as being, let's imagine it being like data, like we've got all of this data running through us. Now, some parts of that data will be fully conscious and we're fully aware of it. Other parts of that data will be in this kind of space in between where we're not, thinking about whatever the thing is every single day, but it's accessible to us. Then there'll be a third aspect of data, which is literally operating in the back room. But that data is still operating. And it's still at a deeply unconscious level, informing how we show up in the world, informing the quality of our relationships, of our work, of our health. Like a lot of our habits, our behaviors will be playing out because of that data. And then we're like, why can't I change? Why on earth can't I change these habits? And it's because you haven't actually accessed the data at the back of the room that needs to be addressed in order to be healed. And so this is where I think shadow work is such an important part of any spiritual as fuck conversation, because what often happens is we talk about spiritual tools like, manifestation or whatever it is. And the reality is if you're not actively working with the shadow self, you're probably not going to get the results you want in relation to what you want to manifest or the healing, the tapping into, say, higher states of consciousness, becoming more psychic, intuitive, doing Liz's work. If you're not aware of this shadow aspect, it's going to be really difficult to get from point A to B and really to attract in the results you want, because you've still got this programming that's probably keeping you in a lower frequency as opposed to the frequency required to attract in the things that you want. So this is where shadow work is absolutely vital to the spiritual journey, to the healing journey. And I also just want to come back for a minute to what I said at the beginning of the conversation about love, light, unicorn spirituality, where we all sort of envision ourselves as these like wild gypsies in a field. And that is lovely. But actually, if you want to manifest your best life, if you want to truly lean into a spiritual as fuck life, then you need to acknowledge that the brighter your light, the darker your shadow.
Yes. Sing it. It's so true.
There is no way around that. Like, you've got to be willing to become broken wide open, is what I call it.
Look in the mirror.
And it's the integration then. It is shine the light on it, unpack it, unpick it, and then integrate all of that and being able to live with, we're not all light. There is lightness, there is dark, and then it's where you choose to spend your time operating at what frequency, or, what is it that you choose to live your life in then.
Totally. And I mean, the thing is, if you're not dealing with the shadow aspects of yourself, it's going to constantly get triggered. Yes. So when you look at your own personal process and you're like, oh my God, that person's a bitch, or, like they're annoying me, they're irritating, chances are there's actually something playing out within you that you're not owning within yourself that is being deeply triggered by that reflection. Because essentially what will happen is, in the reflection of the people around us, we are going to have to face our full self. And
the work.
The work.
The work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dear. And
absolutely.
it takes courage, obviously, to dive into the shadow self. Like, do you have any advice for people that are listening to this right now and going, oh shit, yeah, I definitely know that the shadow's there, but holy shit, I'm so scared. Where do I start? Like, where do I start to face the shadow, Beck?
Well, let's have a chat about the chakras in a minute. But the first thing I want to say is, you know, I was reading some of your copy on the Spiritual as Fuck website, and you referred to everyone as spiritual warriors. This warrior energy is such a big part of what it is to be spiritual, because this is not an easy path. It is a path of growth. It is a path of evolution. So you need to be fully ready to go to the spiritual gym. And there's going to be times we get on that treadmill. You don't want to lift those weights. That just looks like hard work with lots of sweat.
And we hate the gym, don't we, Diana?
You know,
but we find ourselves in there too many times.
But the truth is, like, if you actually want to go on the spiritual journey, we are here to evolve, because when we heal ourselves, we heal the world.
Yes.
And that is actually why we are here.
Yes.
So my answer to your question, Liz, is spiritual warrior. That's not just a word, that's a verb.
Yes.
You got to do the work.
Yeah, it's action. It is. You can't just live in the fifth dimension and above. It's like you physically got to bring things to bear in the physical realm. Yeah.
And I don't, like, you can't just sit with the vision board without doing the work that's stopping you from attracting in what's on your vision board. And, you know, and I'm going to be honest about it, because I do hear people say manifestation, it's all about frequency, it's all about this. You want that frequency. What do you need to actually clear in your energy field? Like, what do you need to heal? It's not enough to go, just change your vibes. Like, I get really frustrated. Maybe it's my shadow. I get quite frustrated about that narrative. It annoys me.
I agree.
And if
I've got some healing to do on that one, clearly.
I think that's such a good point, though, because if you've been sat there and you've been attempting to manifest, if you've been following all the steps that you've read on Google or whatever, and it's not working, then chances are Beck's just hit the nail on the head. You know, what shadow work do you need to do?
Yeah.
Let's go into energy, though, because you're so incredible in terms of your knowledge and what you've learned with working with the energy field, especially with the experience that you've been through. Is there anything that you feel that everybody needs to know when it comes to working with your energy centers? And can you explain the energy centers to us?
Yes, I definitely can. So my love affair with the chakra system is still such a core part of my operating system. So I didn't completely waste that 2 years at the psychic college. And it became such a fundamental part of my healing journey. So whilst I was doing all the work with the psychiatrist, by that point, I had decided to become a Chakradance teacher. So that really was where the deep healing started to take place, because Chakradance is a healing dance modality, which essentially brings together 3 different elements, being free spontaneous dance, to music that resonates with the chakra system, and then it is overlaid with guided meditations to really take people into the energy of each chakra. So to explain the chakra system, you can think of the chakras as being like spiritual organs that process the energy around us. So process, transmute, and transform the energy flow that runs through us in our everyday lives. And so when you think about this concept of a spiritual organ, think about your physical organs. You've got your liver, you've got your heart, you've got, you know, your brain, your eyes. You've got these organs that are all doing completely different things, but they're all still working with the same energy. They all have blood flowing through them. They all have kinetic energy flowing through them, atoms, DNA. So you can think of that stuff as being like universal energy. Or to give you another example, think about universal energy as being, I like this example, as being like the internet. It's out there. We can't necessarily touch it and feel it, but we can tap into it. We know that it's there. Picking up on that metaphor, the chakras are like the apps designed to do different functions, different things, and to process and transmute that energy. But if you think about the chakras as being like apps, every now and then that app needs an upgrade.
I love this explanation.
I love this. I do too. It needs something cleared or something processed in order to be able to go to that next level, in order to be able to transmute different levels of energy through our system. And so each of the 7 chakras are located in a different part of the human body, running from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. Essentially, the base chakra is all about our ability to survive. Can I eat? Can I get money? Do I have a roof over my head? Am I okay in my physical reality? From there, you've got the sacral chakra, which is tapping into that feminine energy. It's about flow. It's about feeling. It's about our sexuality. It's almost like that serpentine, gypsy, feminine energy. You guys are watching me. I'm like dancing here through each chakra.
Check this out on YouTube, everyone.
Yeah. Then you come up into the solar plexus, which is the opposite of the sacral chakra. It's a fire energy, a sun energy. It's yang. It's masculine, and it's within the solar plexus chakra that we really generate the energy to get things done, to own our space in the world, to fire up our purpose. It's like that yang energy. You move up into the heart chakra, which is considered like the rainbow bridge that connects the physical aspects of ourselves, represented by the lower chakras, with the higher, more spiritual aspects of ourselves, represented by, the higher chakras. And the heart is essentially our center of unconditional love, of compassion, of forgiveness. It's represented by the quality of air. Its Sanskrit name is anahata, which translates to becoming unstruck, unhurt.
How beautiful.
And if you think about this idea of forgiveness, it's about like literally breaking the heart wide open, moving through that which has caused us grief in order to expand. We then come up into the throat chakra, which is in the throat cavity. And the throat chakra is about communication. It's about authenticity, being honest with oneself and honest in relation to how we communicate with others. It's the ability to embrace what is called Buddha's wise speech, which is to simply ask ourselves, is what I'm saying true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it the right time? So it's about being very intentional and considered with what we say, but at the same time owning our voice. From there we move up again. The throat chakra is represented by ether, so we're starting to move up into the spiritual realms in terms of the vibration. We then move up into the third eye chakra, which you are very familiar with, Liz.
Absolutely.
This is the home of clairvoyance, of intuition. It's where we dream. It's where we imagine. It's where we connect with the spiritual realms. And then finally, we move up into the crown chakra, which is Sarasraha. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly in Sanskrit, but basically it is the 1,000-petaled lotus. And it is here that we really begin to tap into that like transcendent, infinite, universal consciousness. So this is where we connect really with faith, with like that divine spirituality, and what some may refer to as God, the great mystery, the source. This is where we tap into that energy. Yeah, so that's kind of a mini lesson of the chakras, but there are 2 energy channels that run through the chakras. One is called Ida, one is called Pingala, and they deal with what is called the manifestation current, which is the energy moving down through the chakras into the body. And then there is the liberation current, which is the energy moving up through the body and out. So when you're tapping into intuition or working with spirit, Liz, what you're doing is essentially working with that liberating current to raise your frequency up through the higher chakras to then connect with spirit.
Oh, wow. That is just so interesting. Honestly.
Yeah, they literally are like the anatomy of our spiritual self.
This is making sense in a way, because when I intuitively tap into somebody's energy, I get shown really clearly where a block is. As an example, having that big block, that lower energy around the throat chakra. And that always kind of comes with this message of not able to communicate a message, as an example. So you mentioned this whole like upgrading of the app. Is that around clearing kind of that stuck energy from that energy center? How do we do that?
Look, I mean, the way I often talk about it in relation to teaching Chakradance is you think about the chakras as like muscles. And, sometimes you literally get a knot in your muscle. And in order to start to clear that knot, you might go and dance, you might do yoga, you might stretch, you might have a massage, you might go to an acupuncturist. There are 1,000 different ways you might work with that knot in the muscle. Working with the chakras is actually no different. Like it could be that you need to do something physical. For me, I often do. I need to dance. Chakradance is amazing because, I've just spoken about the 7 chakras, but they each resonate with sound frequency. And so when I'm talking about the chakras as being like a different frequency, think about your musical scale. Your every good boy deserves fruit. You've got higher frequency sounds, you've got lower frequency sounds. So with Chakradance, you're actually working with music that is composed to tap into that chakra through the exact specific sound resonance that is aligned with that chakra. So as the sound frequency works with the energy, it's going to start to dig into those blocks. It's going to start to shift those blocks. So it could be that you want to use like sound or sound healing or dance or yoga, or maybe go to a spiritual healer who is, who has the ability to channel energy from source to start to work with that chakra and essentially start to dissolve those blocks, dissolve those knots. If you think about it like
I get
muscle.
that, because intuitively, what I do for myself personally, sometimes as an example, if I'm just sat at work and I'm kind of working away, my energy can feel stuck. It can feel like stale because I'm just sat in one spot. And intuitively now I get up and I do like crazy stuff. Like I'll do like 30 really quick star jumps, or I'll just kind of like move my body or dance on the spot. And I only need it for like 10, 20 seconds, like, but intense. And I can actually feel the like dislodging of the stuck energy. And I can feel the clarity coming in of the energy coming through my crown. Does that sound crazy?
No, not at all. Because you're essentially, what you're doing is you're stretching out the muscle. And if you think about a nimble muscle, is nimble the right word? An unblocked muscle, a muscle that has been stretched. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Get it.
But if you think about that, like think about blood as being like the energy, you've got blood flow coming back through that muscle. So all of a sudden, all of those nerves are aware, are awake, so they can then start to tap into what's happening in the environment. Or in your case, you've done the clearing where, okay, cool, now this organ is working really well. In your case, the organ being the third eye or the crown chakra or the throat, whatever you're using to tap into communication with spirit. Clairaudience is throat chakra, just to let you know. That if you've done that clearing work, your senses are actually more able to respond to the energy around you.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, and this is something that everyone should do, because not when you can tap into your intuition and you're feeling clearer, even the fact that your decision making is going to be clearer, it's going to be easier. It kind of has that knock-on effect just to life. Getting in the flow, getting things happening, manifestation, all the stuff you've spoken about.
Yeah,
Beck,
absolutely, 100%.
We could talk to you for hours. Oh my goodness, I feel like we've just scratched the surface on the stuff that you've spoken about with the energy and the chakras. Can we ask you to come back at some point?
I would love to come. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation.
Oh,
my heart is so full.
Oh, thank you. And I know that our listeners have just probably gained a shitload, excuse my French, but I'm just thinking here that people are going to be like, where can we find you? What can we do? Because I know that you offer different things with Chakradance, with healing.
Well, I'm pretty excited that we might be doing a little bit of a collaboration with the Intuition Academy. So we'll have to watch that space. People can find me at The Future Is Om. So
your podcast, for anyone that doesn't know.
Yeah, my podcast, which is very much focused on a lot of the ancient wisdom, the healing modalities that I have referenced today. So yeah, you can jump onto our website, which is just www.thefutureisom.com. You can you can download the podcast as well. But yeah, watch this space because early next year, or the podcast will probably be released at that time. We will be launching an e-series of Chakradance Goddess, where we're literally each week working through each chakra, but working with the energy of a goddess in enabling that healing.
Divine.
Yeah, it's incredible. We dance with Kali, Aphrodite, Green Tara. You can find out more on the website.
And we'll obviously be putting all of these links into the show notes. So for anyone that needs Beck in their life, which I think everyone does, head to there and make sure that you actually go and check out the work that Beck does. Now, just to wrap up, Beck, your journey has been wild. I'm sure we've not scratched the surface. What pearls of wisdom do you have for our listeners that may be experiencing anything at all like what you've been through?
Psychic protection is the big one. I ideally would not want anyone to kind of go through the experience that I went through. And the big takeaway for me is if you're listening to this podcast and you're really spiritually curious, then be very aware of your own energy field, of really doing the work to clear your energy field. I think often spiritually as fuck people are so sensitive, and it means that if you're not consciously aware of really doing the work, and it could be something as simple as doing a meditation and really bringing a beautiful golden shield of light around your aura. Or, when you leave your home, imagine the front door being like this energy shield that like cleanses you and protects you as you walk out. And when you get home of an afternoon, when you walk back in, that shield cleanses your energy as you come back through the door. Like, really be very aware that just in the same way you wouldn't put yourself in a room with a bunch of like negative thugs, like bad people, that spirit are no different to human beings. And there are amazing, beautiful human beings, and we want to tap into that higher frequency. But there's also there is this darker side, shadow side. And it's not about judging that. Like, we are all one. Like, it's not about making that bad or those entities bad. Like, in fact, most people who are in that space are there because of trauma and because of bad things. But if you are psychically sensitive and you're doing this work, you don't want to open yourself up and then throw yourself into a pile of mud. You just don't want to do that. So just being very aware of that. In reference of my story, what I would say is if you're going through something like this, it's a deeply personal journey, and it is such healing from childhood trauma is such a massive soul curriculum to undertake. So firstly, I salute you, babe. If you're out there and your story is like mine, I salute you. I'm in awe of you because your soul is actually processing some really big stuff for the collective, and you've been ballsy enough to take that journey on as a soul. So firstly, I salute you. Secondly, always know that fear is your teacher. So when you feel that fear, that anxiety come up, and it will come from your body because all of that trauma is in your body, rather than being afraid of the fear, surrender to love. Ask fear, what are you here to teach me? What are you here to show me? How can I heal with you and through you? I was reading the other day that the original meaning of the word courage is to say things with heart. And what I realized in looking at that is courage is essentially an act of being able to acknowledge fear, but then to process that fear through the heart and enable it to return to love and to speak, to express, to act from that space. So fear is always the teacher.
Wow, such wisdom. Oh, Beck, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being brave, for being open, bringing the real story to the table today. I know that there will be so many of our listeners that can take away so much So thank you so much from the bottom
I'm
of
so
our
grateful.
hearts.
It's just, you are amazing. You guys, Diane, both of you, just thank you so much for holding such a beautiful, sacred space for me and my story.
Thank you. And if you're listening today, please reach out, let us know what you've learned today. And we will definitely be having you back in the future, Beck. So
Yay.
we will see you very soon. Thanks again.
Wait.
That's it for another episode.
Thank you for listening. Did you know that we are building a movement of 1 million people who are spiritual as fuck? We would love for you to join us. You can start by leaving us a review on Apple Podcast. Every month, I'm going to intuitively choose one person and do a psychic reading for you. So
follow us on Instagram, send in your stories and topic suggestions, and join the movement
at spiritual.a.f. Until next time.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.